Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our session, which is entitled Listening to the Ancestors, How Indigenous Traditions of Song and Dance Can Inform Our Responses to Current Ecological Challenges. My name is Alan Marrett, and I'm an Emeritus Professor at the University of Sydney and a Fellow of the Academy of the Humanities. On Monday, we were generously welcomed to country by Mr. Wally Bell, an elder and custodian of the Ngunnawal people, on whose lands the central office of the Academy of the Humanities sits. I'm talking to you today from Adelaide, where I now live and work. I wish to acknowledge that the land from which I'm speaking is the unceded country of the Kaurna people. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, as well as to all Indigenous people attending our session today. Our panel focuses on the Aboriginal ceremonial arts, song, dance, and visual design, and how the knowledge embedded in these might, after proper consultation, discussion, and with the permission of their custodians, inform our response to the multiple environmental challenges we face today. The ancient repertories of Aboriginal song have, since European settlement, been decimated. More than decimated, brought almost to the point of extinction. It goes without saying that when we lose these ancient songs, we also lose the wisdom and knowledge embedded in them. Miraculously, and to the enduring credit of their heroic custodians, a significant number of song traditions survive today as unique sources of knowledge and wisdom. And equally miraculously, songs that have become dormant have been reawakened. These song traditions might, again, with the proper agreement of their custodians, be drawn upon in our quest to overcome the many difficulties facing the world and its many beings at this time. Because time is short, my introductions to the speakers and their presentations will be brief. More details are available, however, in the program for the symposium. There are 4 short papers in this session, and if all goes to plan, we'll have about 20 minutes for questions from the audience at the end. Attendees can post their questions through the Q&A function at the bottom of their screen. Because of the webinar format we're using, however, only the panelists will be seen on the screen. You can also follow the discussion via the Academy's Twitter handle @HumanitiesAU and the hashtag AAH Symposium. So our first paper is Song, Dance and Language in Noongar Country. It will be presented by Clint Bracknell and Trevor Ryan. Clint is a musician and researcher from the South Coast Noongar region of Western Australia and Associate Professor at Whopper and Edith Cowan University. Trevor is a Noongar Yamaji stage and screen performer and a drama teacher with a strong interest in language and cultures. He is currently enrolled in an MA or in a master's degree at Edith Cowan University. So over to you, Clint and Trevor.
Thank you, Alan. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge Noongar Country and the tribal area of Whadjuk, also our elders and the collaborators, including the dancers with me in this photo. An example of how we are extending Noongar traditions to increase our connection to country. The title of our paper is Songs, Dance and Language in Noongar Country. The second slide, the Noongar Country region covers the whole southwest corner of Western Australia from over 24,000 square kilometres, or in comparison of being the same size as the country of Germany. There are over 30,000 people, culturally Noongars, which means humans, in this part of the world. Within this region, there are over 14 different tribes, 1 language, and 3 different dialects. The third slide, language was suppressed in our region, and so were songs and dances. Today, very few people identify as everyday Noongar speakers. Even fewer people sing in the old style. Many people dance, but they usually dance similar dances, particularly the Kangaroo and Emu Dances, which is accompanied by the didgeridoo of Northern Australia, which also reminds us of the Commonwealth coat of arms, which the kangaroo and the emu are holding a shield that symbolises Australia's 6 states. And the fourth slide, over to Clint.
Thanks, Trevor. I'll just acknowledge too, I'm talking to you from Juru country, in the wet tropics of northern Queensland. So I guess the work that Trevor and I have been doing together is based on this idea that's been put forward by ecomusicologists such as Professor Aaron Allen, that environmental crisis is not just the fault of flawed science and economics, but a disconnection between culture and nature, between humans and landscapes. And in this continent, this is a fairly recent thing. Humans used to be much more connected to country. And that's because language, song, and dance from this country support human connection to the environment, a key to people's everyday well-being and may be critical to our shared future. We've been working together on this Australia Research Council funded project called Restoring On-Country Performance. We call it Rock Up for short. It's involved looking at archival manuscripts, illustrations, photos, audio and video of Noongar performance from our region, then creating and sharing a Noongar on-country performance repertoire, and then raising awareness of how country informs culture and culture helps us understand country. So our key question is that, Noongar language, song and dance embody and maintain connection to country. How do we sustain that connection? In renewing and creating repertoire, I think, and Trevor thinks, we maintain a Noongar traditional practice. We listen to ancestors and country in order to create new repertoire. And the changing world itself necessitates innovation within our Noongar traditional practice. So we not only need to listen to ancestors and country, we need to listen to youth, because it's imperative that youth get engaged in this or it's not going to be sustained. And we also listen to ecologists, because there are people in our country that are not Noongar that are very concerned for country and do listen to it in their own way. So we want to get into their perspective too and incorporate that into what we're doing with coming up with this new repertoire. A lot of the people we've been working with, particularly performers, were involved in our adaptation of Shakespeare's Macbeth called Hecate. This reframed Macbeth to be more connected to ideas of country in the way that we see it, and it foregrounded the title character of Hecate over Macbeth because she embodies country. So we flipped it, and that's been pretty much the start of our big trajectory here with coming up with new repertoire focusing on our country. Uncle Barry Maguire and Nanaroma Winmar have been imperative in guiding us, particularly with Uncle Barry guiding me as a singer and guiding Trevor as a dancer. Nanaroma Winmar is also the most experienced Noongar language teacher in our region. Without their support, we couldn't do what we do. And we've also got an ecologist, Pierre Horowitz, who's working with us too, because we want to talk with him about how he looks at country, how he observes things, and make sure that we can find links. And there are ecologists that really want to expand their own worldviews, and he's certainly one of them. So when we develop this performance repertoire, we do it on country, and country is actually part of the process. We're listening to country, we're listening to senior people, we're listening to ancestors, and that's all part of the creative process, the creative research process. Trevor, do you want to talk about the species that we've chosen to focus on with the dances you've created?
Yep. We decided to focus on these species that were unrepresented in Noongar performance repertoire. and all connected to water, the sustaining life force. The 5 animals and 1 element dances that were created were the bull shark, groundwater, stingray, dolphin, dragonfly, and bobtail. The bull shark dance is about the shark that creeps upstream from the salt water to the fresh water, slowly gliding through the current of the murky waters while grinding its teeth to find a resting place to give birth to her pups. And the reason why this shark actually travels from salt water to fresh water is because of its osmosis regulatory, which is where it can flush out the salt water from the fresh water. And these sharks have been doing this for over 400 million years. The second dance that we've created is the Groundwater Dance. This dance is about the ancestral waters that lay beneath Mother Earth. And when the tablelands rises from the rainfalls, it slowly makes its way upwards to kiss Mother Earth from underneath. And the water within one of the areas within the Perth region, which is the Nangara Mounds, dates back to over 175 million years old. The third dance is the Stingray Dance. This dance demonstrates how it lays on the ocean's floor, hiding and disguising itself by flicking sand all over its body to avoid any larger predators that swim above. The fourth one is the Dolphin Dance. It's about the river. It's about the river shores being painted by the movement of the dolphin as the top silky layer reflects the moonlight that is slowly ripped apart by the dorsal fin that plays within its waters before changing into its dreaming land animal, the dingo, that moves about on country. The Dragonfly Dance is a transformation dance and a territorial dance about an insect protecting their home and source of water while being on standby, looking, flying, and hanging about for any other competitors or predators that lurk in the distance, away, hanging water while flying and talking. And the last dance is the Bobtail Dance. This dance is about mating for life, and they are never alone while they move about looking for water and sunlight. This dance is about being loyal to each other and always being there for one another. The next slide will be, next slide is slide 11. These dances are for everyone, and the strong beats and the language singing immediately engages the young youth. These are workshops that we've done with high schools, with teenagers throughout the metropolitan area of Perth, which were received with open arms and with a clear understanding towards the reasoning behind each of the movements throughout the sections of the dances. We explained who we were and the areas we belong to throughout Noongar country, while also expressing that connection to country, dance, song, and language. We explained the 2 animal dances and the reasons of why we chose the movements, song, language that connects them to country, being the bull shark and the stingray dance, with over 15 students in each of the workshops from one of the Bernard days, which was at the Joondalup campus. Slide 12.
We've got something special now. So I don't know if Trevor's seen this, but this is an early draft of some videos that we're developing based on the songs that I've worked up and the dances Trevor's created. So this is a sneak peek. And I think we probably better wrap up now. There's our website, and that's going to have all of our resources we're developing. And I'll just say thank you, Trevor, for presenting with me. It's been an honor to help you with your master's project.
Yep, and thank you
look forward to more stuff like this.
Thank you very much as well, Clint, for everything that you've done for me.
So thank you very much indeed, Trevor and Clint, for that insight into the inspiring work that you're doing, and how fantastic that that video turned up today. That was really wonderful to see that. So thank you very much. So our next paper is entitled Cherry, Sea Breeze, and Chenji, Fire: What Indigenous Wisdom has to teach us in this time of climate and other environmental emergencies. I'll be presenting this paper with Pai Linda Ford. And since I've already introduced myself in the introduction to the panel, let me turn to my co-presenter. Pai Linda Ford is an Associate Professor and Senior Research Fellow at the Northern Institute at Charles Darwin University in the College of Indigenous Futures, Education and the Arts. She is a Rak Maranungu traditional Aboriginal owner from Kurunju in the Finnis River and Reynolds River regions, southwest of Darwin, Northern Territory. So Pai will speak first. So over to you, Pai.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. First of all, I'd just like to say thank you, Trevor and Clint, for your amazing presentation. What an act to follow. Brilliant. And I loved hearing your saltwater and freshwater meeting, which is similar to my country that Alan's just mentioned, Kurunju. So, yo, Bua Nimba, Darakea, Ghana, Pulu Dalyak Nimba, on whose unceded country we live and work, and also pay respects to any Indigenous people in our audience today. In this introduction to the session, Alan referred to some of the ways in which the papers in the panel address the question of how Australian Indigenous traditions of ancestral song, dance and visual design might inform our response to current environmental challenges. I would like to begin our presentation by looking at painting of Mangirawa, Chenji, Fire. As an example of what the expressive arts can tell us about Indigenous responses to the environment, Ngirawa is, in my language, for what is often translated as dreamings or ancestral being. My painting behind me illustrates this. Sorry. The practice of giving fire to my country. We will then discuss a Lilga song about the same Ngirawa, fire, and Wanga song about another closely related Ngirawa, sea breeze, jetty. We will reflect upon the critical role that songs such as these play in the ecology of my country, Kurunju, in the daily region of North Australia, as well as their relevance to current environmental emergencies. We were Kurunju Yemen, my country, Kurunju, I'm giving you fire to make you warm and clean. I received this form of words together with the authorization to give fire to country from my mother, Mulukang, and my grandfather, her father, Jacoboy, and I call out these words whenever I give fire to my country. Giving fire to country is a reciprocal process. In return for my giving fire to my country, to clear it for hunting and to encourage new growth, my country gives me food and many other benefits. My acrylic painting called Waregang or Seasonal Fire was painted on Belgian linen in 2005 as part of the Aboriginal process for my doctoral thesis, Narratives and Landscapes, the capacity to serve Indigenous knowledge interests. The white dots that you can see in the centre are domestic fires. The yellow are cool fires as the year progresses, and the light red dots are moderate fires, and the dark red hot dots are the hot fires, which we don't really encourage because they scorch the country. So to summarise this seasonal fire painting of my Maranogo country, Kurinju, illustrates how the fires are set alight at different places at different times of the calendar year. Turning now to the song about Janji, fire, this is sung in Maranga, a language that is closely related to my languages, Maranogo and Marathia. All three languages belong to the Mari language family, which forms part of the wider complex of Dave languages and their associated clans, groups known as Marawadga. People who belong to the Marawadga ceremonial complex share songs like the Chanji and Chedi. Since time immemorial, Wanga and Lirga songs such as these have been created and performed by songmen to reflect the moods of the country. As a member of the Marawadga group, I am able to draw upon these songs to link me to the country. Chandi Fire is often sung at kapuk ceremonies for Marawadga's members. Kapuk ceremonies are the last of a series of mortuary rites that are performed to allow the spirit of a deceased person to leave the society of the living and join with the ancestors. And fire plays a central role in this ceremony. This song, Chanji, has a particular significant for me that links me to my country. It was sung for my Allah, my mother, Molokan Nancy Day's funeral mortuary rites in August 2009 on the Finnis River coastal floodplains by my uncle Captain Monage, whom we see on the slide, and other songmen at Kangaroo and Menling near Litchfield National Park. Both Alan and Linda attended these ceremonies, as well as Sally Trelawney, and sang with the Wanga and Jamba groups respectively. My spiritual relationship with the song through my Marathia connections to my Ngirawat, Chanji, is very powerful. My Chanji Ngirawat tells me when, where and how to light the fires. It is part of who I am. The song Chanji and the Kapuk mortuary ceremonies reconnects us to each other through fire and country. Our second song is the Wanga song about the sea breeze, Jedi, Ngirawat. The sea breeze, Ngirawat, and the fire, Ngirawat, are strongly connected because it is sea breeze that gives life to fire so that it can burn the country. When sea breeze blows from the west, the gentle winds pick up and whistle to the fire to race across the grass that is fully dried out. Even though underneath the grass, there is still moisture in the ground. The fire burns across the top of the grass and the water that is lying beneath it. This happens just after the early burns are started in May, June each year. Later in August, September, the weather and the wind really gets under the fires. These are not easily managed. Today, as a result of climate change, the wind directions can change instantly and unpredictably. This is because the vegetation has changed and so has the fuel loads. this has become a dangerous time. Alan will now talk about the Wonga song about the sea breeze jelly.
We've just heard from Pai about the relationship of the sea breeze and fire. We believe that the Indigenous wisdom traditions revealed by songs, such as those about fire and sea breeze, point to ways of being in the world that may prove crucial to our surviving current environmental challenges. In a nutshell, our argument goes like this. The current ongoing destruction of the environment is enabled by worldviews that rest upon certain assumptions about the relationship between what is conceived of as sentient, animate, and alive, and what is conceived of as non-sentient, inanimate, or dead. It is not uncommon for living beings to be regarded as sentient and all other phenomena as non-sentient and inanimate. It is this deep rift between living beings, and in particular human beings, and their physical environment that often underpins the treatment of the environment in disrespectful and destructive ways. By contrast, more sustainable ontologies tend to draw the lines between the inanimate and the animate worlds differently. And traditional Aboriginal songs such as Sea Breeze or Cherry exemplify this. If we pay close attention to the song, it reveals a reality where phenomena, including things that in certain mainstream ontologies would be seen as inanimate, are regarded as alive and self-generating in the present moment according to deep ancestral precedent. Cherry is a Wonga song that was given in dream to the Mariamu songman Charlie Niwali Brinkin by his deceased ancestors known as Mayawa. Charlie Brinkin in turn passed the song on to Morris Chuckle Mulkur, whom we see in the slide. Morris sang the song for me and helped me and linguist Lisbeth Ford translate its text. Wonga songs, which are given to the living by the dead, are owned and performed by most language groups in the Daly region, including Pai Linda Ford's Rak Mak Mak Maranungu clan. What follows is a close reading of the first line, though you'll notice that the second line is almost identical. The first thing to notice is the intimacy inherent in addressing Sea Breeze as brother. Sea Breeze is family. What I've translated as he is manifesting himself right here and now as he has always done is in Mariamu, Kaganja Kinyini Kavul. As is common in Aboriginal languages, the verb is agglutinative. That is, it consists of a verb stem to which elements are added before and afterwards to inflect for person, mood, tense, and so on. The verb stem of kinyini is ni, which means to make or do. Put ki in front, kinyi, and it means he, she, or it makes or does. But since we know that the subject is male, brother, Sea Breeze, we've used the masculine pronoun he throughout the translation. The suffix ni makes the verb kinyi ni reflexive. He makes himself, or he manifests himself. Linguist friends tell me that these sorts of self-reflexive verb constructions occur most frequently within the poetics of song. And in such contexts, they can be regarded as unique and special poetic expressions of a deep truth, namely the self-reflexive, indeed self-actualizing nature of ancestral beings, Nira, such as the Sea Breeze Nirwab. My Aboriginal teachers taught me that self-generation is an intrinsic quality of dreamings which require no agency beyond themselves for their existence. And this is further attested to in numerous academic sources, such as in key works by T.G.H. Strelo and W.E.H. Stanner. Sea breeze is also eternal. This eternal aspect is expressed by the coverb kavul, which follows kinyini and means literally he lies or he has always lain there. Sea breeze is also present, and this here and nowness is indicated by the word kaganja, which precedes kinyini in the first line and occurs at the end of the line, the second line, and means literally right here and now. So to summarize, Karamanacheri, brother sea breeze, Kaganja, right here and now, Kinyini, he is manifesting himself, Kavul, as he has always done. Dreaming such as sea breeze, Jeri, stand in their own unique place, that is, they are self-generating, while simultaneously maintaining deep connections with other beings throughout space and time. Texts such as Maurice Mulcaw's song about Jeri embody an ancient wisdom that is indigenous to this land, a view of the world that has, for millennia, sustained and nurtured the relationship between humans and the environment in this country that we now call Australia. I believe that if we can listen to this and hear it, there is much to be learned. Back to you.
When we feel the sea breeze, that's what we say. We call out to that sea breeze. Yo, you got independent. Machanji and Jerry Nirwa offer us critical lessons about climate change and adaptability to the environment in which we live and function. It is about knowing, being and activating Chenji that allow us to coexist with the environment and to manage our biodiversity in a way that offers sustainable outcomes. Through my changing Edward, I have cultural roles and responsibilities to fulfill as determined through my lineal linkages to the country, to which I belong of my mother Biel, Makali, grandmother Milyanga and Chabut, grandfather Jacoboy. This Chenji and Jedi knowledge is passed on to my children and so on into the future. So, yes, our joint Alan and my fire and sea breeze story is finished now.
So thank you, Pai, for sharing your wonderful deep knowledge of country with us. Our next paper is entitled Country, Family and Performance Traditions, Global Challenges and Local Responses from Kurunju and the Gafanyana. It will be presented by Pai Linda Ford, once again, whom I've previously introduced, and Linda Barwick, who is a fellow of the Academy, of the Humanities and emeritus professor at the University of Sydney. Linda is a musicologist who specialises in the study of Australian First Nations music, immigrant music, and cultural traditions in Italy and the Philippines. So over to you, Pai and Linda.
Thank you, Alan. I will start by acknowledging the Larrakia and Kaurna peoples on whose unceded country we live and work today, and also pay our respects to any Indigenous people in our audience. In many places around the world, performing ancestral traditions affirms continuity of cultural identity. In this moment is synchronized with past and future generations. Performance in ancestral places embeds the sense of the deep present. In this paper, we take a country-centered perspective on intergenerational transmission of ancestral songs and ceremonies. We consider the effects that global challenges and local responses are having in two ancestral traditions, each performed to connect country and ancestors with current and future generations. Performance is important because it happens now. Now is when the transfer of knowledge happens from one generation to the next. Now is the only moment in which our responsibilities can be realised. I will be talking about the Wali Wanga from my country, Kurunju, in the northwestern part of what we now call Australia. Wali is women's dancing, Wanga is men's, singing accompanied by didgeridoo, kanji, and clapsticks, nanga. Linda will talk about Maggio, sung theatre from Garfagnana region of Tuscany in faraway Italy, where she has researched for 3 decades. We will hear how both traditions are profoundly affected by challenges such as global warming, pandemics, government policies, and economic development. Singing and dancing is born from and forever abides in sites on my country, tied to its places and people. Performing entwines ancestors with family and keeps songs and dances alive. Performing Wali Wanga makes our country happy. Arrararru. Wanga clapsticks wake up ancestors. We know our Wali dances makes country happy when wind blows the leaves. Like making a baby laugh. Arrararru. Oh no. So the challenges for country, global warming, we need to do our annual burning earlier, make space for noxious weeds, 5G paragraphs, which chokes out our native plants. Economic development, land alienation, pastoralism, mining, enabled by roads, affects country and people. And depopulation, stolen generations and other government policies are the most important factor to understand what separates people from country. So here you can see my wet season painting behind me, and that's an aerial view of the floodplain where the salt meets the fresh water. This slide shows generations of our women, Pago, performing country through Wali Wanga. Ala Mori Wudi, Ala Mulokang Nancy Day, myself, Paye, Chloe Nalavan, Emily Chaman, with Linda, Sally, and myself in Sydney at a special ceremony for Alan. Alan Mori is dancing at the front in the 50s, and Mum in 2001 in Canberra, myself on country, my mother's couple ceremony, Chloe in 2009, dancing as well, and Emily, and when we were in Sydney with Linda, Alan and Sally in 2018. When we perform Wali, we are performing with our ancestors and our future generations. Even when we perform in Canberra or Sydney, Wali brings our Kurunju country along with it. This is a Wanga song made by, oops, are we playing a song, Linda? No? This is a Wanga song made by our Wajigan relative, my uncle, Bobby Lane Lamajuju, to accompany our Wali dancing. The photo shows me and my Ala Yongi, my mother's younger sister, at Kangaroo in 2009. And she's the last one of that generation, warming up to the country and getting ready for an important ceremony. In the photo, we are calling out to country after we women have danced wali to a wanga song sung by countrymen. I will now hand over to Linda, who will talk about the country of Martia.
Thanks, Pai. What I have to tell you about Majo comes from my relationship with Garfagnini people of the Garfagnana today. We'll hear from cultural leaders Andrea Bertei and Pier Giorgio Lenzi, who've encouraged me to share their words with you, and I'm delighted that my friend and great Majo performer Patrizia Bartolomei is listening to us from Perth. The Majo performance tradition is closely entwined with family and community of the Garfagnana Valley in northwest Tuscany, where it's traditionally performed outdoors, surrounded by chestnut trees, which once were cultivated for food, warmth and shelter. Today, this Majo space at Gragnanella, pictured here in 2000, has disappeared. The land has been sold and trees have been cleared for development. Chestnut forests across the Garfagnana have been badly affected by global warming. Trees have become infested by various blights and parasitic wasps, and groves have been clear-felled for more profitable timber crops or construction of accommodation for tourists. Meanwhile, withdrawal of local government services has forced Garfagnini to travel far from their country for work and education, meaning that the forests are no longer tended and introduced weeds now strangle the chestnut trees. As the forests have dwindled then, so too has the performance infrastructure, the spaces, societies and contexts that sustain Majo performance. Yet the practice of Majo also depends on soft infrastructures, on know-how, on social practices nurtured within communities and families to foster intergenerational transmission. Although country has struggled to adapt to the pressures we've mentioned, Garfagnino families and communities still guard and promote knowledge of Majo. Younger generations have always been included in performances in supporting roles like playing a small part or helping with stage management. Children are taught during breaks in performances, as we can see here at the bottom, with Renzo Comparini teaching his grandson to perform the ritual sword play. Today, local efforts to counter the many factors that are inhibiting ongoing performance have concentrated on providing opportunities for children to learn and perform Majo through special events such as the local fair, pictured on the right, and informal school programs. Because Majo themes stress renewal and rebirth in the teeth of adversity, young people are traditionally given the role of opening the performance. Here, Barbara Bertolucci, the youngest member of the Piazza al Cerchio company in 1992, sings the opening stanza at Gragnanella. The relationship of the Majo tradition to country is explicitly mentioned in this opening couplet. May our beautiful tradition conquer once again the plains and the mountains. Behind Barbara, we can see community members, including musicians, supporting her.
Questa bella tradizione riconquisti il piano e il monte. Il bel maggio direrò
Sadly, Mudgel performance in the Garfanyana has radically declined. As recently as the 1990s, we saw 20 to 30 performances annually, but that has dwindled to only 2 performances in 2016, since when it's ceased to be performed in its full 3-hour format. Attempts to revive it in 2020 were made impossible by the coronavirus pandemic. Pandemics may mean we lose old people with their knowledge and love for the tradition. COVID-19 has also meant that singing and dancing in company, as well as gathering of community, has been suppressed at a critical time for the future of community arts. I'll now hand back to Pai.
Thank you, Linda. In both countries, there is concern about the endangerment of a performance tradition. Yet we all see some hope for the future. For Walliwanga, today's situation is still formed by the actions of old people, including encouragement of younger generations. Today, younger people like Taman, Emily Ford, are taking initiatives to use social media like Instagram to reach out to the Murrununga language diaspora. And she is also active in working with me and other Murrununga people to archive our own contemporary cultural knowledge in appropriate and sustainable ways of paradisic digital archive. I will hand over to Linda to cover Hope of Mudgel.
For Mudgel, Pier Giorgio Lenzi sees hope in the groundwork that's been done through nurturing of younger performers, and optimism that the cultural identity reflected in Mudgel will find expression in new forms of culture, will explode and give life. Berthet puts faith in modern technologies to drive wider awareness and dissemination of Mudgel and its special qualities through gatherings such as ours today. His expression, "a single nut in a sack makes no sound," points to the responsibility of today's generations to take collective action. In conclusion, the ancestral traditions we've discussed have significant commonalities. Although locally specific, each tradition is similarly held dear by its people and country. We have seen similar struggles to maintain social identity through performance on country, and similar hopes to address challenges for the future of the tradition using all available means. Both traditions are similarly affected by global changes in climate, technology and pandemics that disrupt country, people and performances, no matter where they're located. I'll now hand over to Pai for the last word.
In both Kurunju and the Garfanyana, we have seen similar dedication against the odds to maintain social identity through ancestral performance. Holders of tradition can reach out across the globe to share experiences and draw on the wisdom nurtured through our performances to give us strength to keep our performances, traditions going. This is what we are doing in this session today. Like our Indigenous colleagues who bravely attended COP 2026 in Glasgow in recent time, this past fortnight to influence global factors of affecting us all. We need to find strength in numbers to join forces to do right by country, ancestors and future generations. Ma.
Thank you, Pai and Linda. Our fourth and final paper is entitled Singing for Daybreak, Musical Resilience and Environmental Change in the Northern Kimberley. The presenters are Matthew Dembalali Martin, Rona Gunganda Charles, and Sally Trelawn. Matthew is a Nguranyin and Woonambal senior lawman and singer from the Kimberley region. Rona is a Nguranyin and Nyigana singer, dancer, and multidisciplinary artist and cultural teacher, also from the Kimberley region. Rona is currently a leader of the Jumba Project, a community-based, research-born initiative to sustain intergenerational transmission of practices and knowledges of the dance song form known as Jumba. She is currently enrolled in a master's degree at the University of Melbourne. Sally Trelawney is an associate professor and ARC Future Fellow at the University of Melbourne, where she is also co-director of the Research Unit for Indigenous Arts and Cultures. She is an applied ethnomusicologist with a primary area specialisation in Indigenous song dance practices and historical collections relating to the Kimberley region of Northwest Australia. So over to you, Matthew, Rona and Sally.
Thank you, Alan, and thank you to all the co-panelists today. On behalf of myself, Matthew and Rona, I acknowledge the Ngunnawal peoples and lands, past, present and future. And I also acknowledge the Wurundjeri from whose land I'm speaking today. It's important that I also acknowledge Nguranyin lands and peoples where this paper was co-created with Rona Gungan and Charles, and also Nyigana, which is the place from which Matthew's contributions have been filmed. Due to unanticipated recent events, I'm presenting our paper alone today, based on or drawing on the paper that we've prepared together over the last month. As a result, there's obviously going to be some limitations, and I will do the best I can and with respect. I'd like to acknowledge as well Pete O'Connor from Dumbi Aboriginal Corporation, the dancer in the foreground here, who actually stepped in and pre-recorded contributions from Matthew Martin at the last minute. So this paper is concerned with how knowledges of environmental and social change are recorded in song and transmitted intergenerationally. It's also concerned with how song practices that manage change are transmitted and sustained. Songs record history, of course, but Matthew stresses the song writes our history. It's active. In addressing this, we consider change to landscapes around the last ice age, social, linguistic and cultural change post-contact, and change in music systems, including innovation and music endangerment. It's useful for us to approach this topic via a frame of musical resilience, concerned with the aspects of musical systems that play a role in human social adaptation to and recovery from environmental change, and those aspects of musical systems that enable them and their practitioners to suffer loss, return, change, and recover, thus continuing to support social and environmental health. Two of our authors, Rona and Matthew, are leading proponents of Jumba, a diverse genre of dance song that's shown publicly at festivals and celebratory events across much of the linguistically and culturally diverse Kimberley region, known by various names. And as such, our focus in this paper is on this genre, particularly as held by Nguranyin. In particular, we've chosen to look at two songs given to Matthew Martin's mother, Maisie Jodpa, in Nguranyin language by the spirit of her deceased father in a dream in the 1970s. So Matthew is going to open our paper with a performance of one of these songs, that which references the mountain Winjargan. Winjargan is a sandstone outcrop that rises 800 metres above sea level just north of the Prince Regent River, which runs along the fault line from the western coast in the northern Kimberley. Winjargan, also named Mount Han, is in the Gundungurri patrilineal estate of Nguranyin country, which is the clan country of Jodpa. So over to Matthew. So thanks to Matthew there. And I'll just flag that the content that follows is prepared by Rona Charles. The lyrics for this song, as is typical of Jumba, are short, but there's many layers of meaning. The lyrics tell a story of the experience that Jodhpur had when her deceased father, who was a composer himself, visited her in a dream and took her from Wa, Mount Elizabeth Station, where she lived and worked, to the south on a journey. Wa is in the south, on a journey north to Winjagan, their homeland. Jodhpur says, Winjagan gula gala wunganeri, that's that place, Winjagan. I was looking up at that. Then her father says, Gulanji yangad yangad, go on Birinyeri, come here, there's salt water and it's boggy. Jodhpur's song also references the story of Damalangari, the black-headed python, the widow of Wijingari, the northern quoll. From atop Winjagan, Damalangari looked to the west, to the salt water and the setting sun. She also sung out to the east, to Burad, which would be the sign that her period of mourning for her husband was over and that new life could begin. In terms of geography, this song text is quite curious. It suggests that salt water is approaching Winjagan or it's surrounding it. However, Winjagan is beyond the reach of the tide. Wa, where Jodhpur was, is further inland. To understand this, we must look further. That much of the region was under salt water in the distant past is widely reported in Ngurrindjin creation stories. Additionally, elders speak of a tsunami prior to the last ice age that flooded Ngurrindjin, Wurrulda and Wunawal country, causing mass loss of life and causing people to take shelter on mountains, which became islands. Following the flood, Wandjina ancestors remade the world, leaving themselves on cave walls. Research into the big history of this region aligns with this. A study by Whitley et al. In 2018 shows a dramatic fluctuation and rise in sea level, escalating to the current level of 14 to 7,000 years ago at the end of the last ice age. In these contexts, MND's advice, come here, the salt water and the ground is boggy, resonates. And Matthew, as we considered all this evidence together, links the tsunami and the Wandjina Burad in the context of the song Winjagan. I'll play his comments.
That he'll stand up what I was talking about. And the tsunami wave came and he didn't knock that hill down standing. But underneath you get a cave and Wandjina came and put himself there. They put that Wandjina. This Wandjina is called a Brad.
And so Burad sits under Winjagan on the dance totem that's been created and used for this song, pictured there on the right. Importantly, at the same time as all this history, the song is of the genre of Jumba that has an emotional appeal to people and place in the here and now. To call the name of place is to call up its affective qualities, including sadness off country and joy or good liam when singing for it and being on it. Salt water is often used in Jumba to reference states of sorrow or yearning for people past and country left, and the experience of song creation. For Jodhpur's father, this was sorrow for his daughter and country left behind. And for Jodhpur, this was sorrow for Winjagan and her father. Sung today, singers, dancers and family feel a pull to Winjagan, to Jodhpur and others. This layering of big historical knowledges of environmental events, ancestral stories, more recent events of social change, and recent personal and affective experiences of people in place is typical of Jumba. And a quick note that recent events of social change are a primary theme, and some of those are pictured here, but I don't have time to go into them. Moving on, we now see how Jumba songs record histories of change in the world. So how do they also work as tools to manage the changing world into the future? So Matthew has started to explain this.
As you're dancing, you're stamping on the ground, you're waking up the spirit. You're singing and you're hitting this stuff. That echo go everywhere especially up there, it's hill country, you know, big over hills everywhere. You see the echo, you see the spirit comes up when they listen to sound. And when the spirit come up, you'll see everything like fruit, bush fruit and everything all healthy. Every time they bear fruits, healthy fruit. If you get a sugar bag, healthy sugar bag. You kill something, kangaroo, fat, crocodile, turtle, everything we eat is healthy. It's healthy like the tree, the water. The water don't run dry. It's like a wungut, the rainbow serpent, boss for the wungut water. When they listen to this, it's like they eating their bone. The spirit eating their bone, they get strong bones. That's why you see them kids real happy and thing. They're not looking sad. They're looking forward for dancing or anything. They'll do anything. Now the bone that or not is strong to do anything. Dance. They can run all day too, if they want. They have the country and for themselves they feel strong. They're not weak. The spirit, the singing, the dancing, that make them healthy. It's always with them. Yeah.
So here, Matthew explained the role of Jumba, particularly in response to devastating crisis in youth suicide in the region. And elsewhere, his father, the master composer, Scotty Martin, has explicated that maintaining these tools of music is for the sake of all humanity. The lyrics, rhythm, tune, he said, are, quote, like a power generator lighting up the country, end quote. So around the clapsticks and dancing, what other musical practices are cogs in the power generator? Resilience factors include, but are not limited to, multivalency and the potential for reinscription of meaning, perhaps as we've seen with wind jargon, metaphor and metonym, parataxis and minimal variation, accessible and flexible melodic structures, sonic structures and rhythmic mode that maximize participation, all gender, all age roles in singing and dancing, and high variability in song texts, but with a small number of musical systems assisting remembrance and transmission over time, as well as of course the aforementioned affective qualities of melody and vocal tone. The adaptability of Jumba in these ways has enabled its persistence through periods of massive change, including change that's threatened harm to Jumba itself, wrought by language bans, removal of children, and displacement of people from the country that anchors songs. So this brings us to our final point. What does it take to sustain these tools to manage a changing world into the future? Since the 1910s, in the Kimberley, outsiders have used recording sound and writing down stories as a way to preserve Jumba. Today in research and community, there's a focus on transmission. Over the past 10 years, we've seen the following strategies practiced. Use of recordings and documentation as new platforms for intergenerational knowledge transmission, access to the big data of Jumba via new database tools that link metadata across collections and archives. And this has helped to piece together the puzzle of archival records to bring dances that have almost been decimated back to life. And we see these each year at the annual Mullingham Festival. New venues and social institutions in which to practice Jumba, including research practices, research projects. So using research to actually create forums and opportunities to practice Jumba, practice intergenerational knowledge transmission. Jumba in classrooms is a big strategy that Rona was to speak about. And of course, festivals such as the Mullingham Festival and the Calac Festival. In terms of future strategies, it's hoped that the circumstances in which new songs might be dreamt and composed are created. So to conclude, Jumba offers to new generations and societies knowledge of environmental change. knowledge of environmental change. And its poetic and musical systems offer tools that have been used to manage environmental change for thousands of generations. From changing landscapes at the end of the last ice age to new pastoral industries, new multilingual, multicultural societies, new musical scenes, and new digital and educational institutions for transmission. The crisis that music endangerment and social and health inequity presents for local, national, and global societies is as profound in the face of today's environmental emergencies. We must ask, how can we listen and learn from Indigenous song and singers more often and more deeply? What do practitioners know about how to keep these strategies for sustaining life going that might be shared? And how can the academy and society respond to these knowledges more effectively and more responsibly? How can we sing back is the question that Matt and Rona pose. Matt is going to finish our presentation with Barad, which is the song sung by Damal Ngari and Barad, the Wandjina, as they watched and sang for daybreak, waiting for the world to respond.
This song I'll be singing, it's called The Blood.
Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Matthew, Rona, and Sally, for that profound insight into the deep past, as well as, of course, the issues that are facing us in the present. And thank you, Sally, for pulling it all together and holding it all together in a sort of rapidly changing environment. So really appreciate that. So we now come to questions. We have roughly a quarter of an hour. And I have been sent through a number of questions via the Q&A function. But I'd just like to remind people that there is still an opportunity to post questions using that Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And unfortunately, Pyden de Ford has to leave us for another commitment, I think. Yeah. Okay. So the floor is now open. Let me start with a question from Caroline Rosello. This was put after Pi and my paper, and it is, you mentioned coexistence with the environment, and I was wondering what is different with co-evolution. I'm not sure whether that is addressed specifically to us. I don't actually remember using the word coexistence in the paper, but perhaps I'm wrong. I have to say that perhaps there is a technical difference here between coexistence and co-evolution that I'm not picking up on. So I'm just wondering if there's anybody else in the panel who would like to respond to this. seems like I'm not getting any volunteers here. So maybe I can just have a quick go at responding. I mean, aside from any technical differences there may be between those terms, I don't personally see any great difference between coexisting as opposed to co-evolving, except perhaps that, to me, co-evolution does actually have more of a sense of interdependence and intimacy than coexistence. There seems a sort of parallelism implied by coexistence, whereas co-evolution seemed to me a much more integrated and intimate and connected expression. But as I say, I don't actually remember using that word. So if nobody else on the panel has anything else to add to that, I have a question from Rita Metzenroth, which is actually directed to Pi. But perhaps Clint and Trevor, you might like to respond to this. The question is, do you see a feedback loop between changes in country as a result of climate change and potential changes to songs that reflect those changes?
I might take that. So songs that reflect climate change. There are certain older songs that I'm aware of that are associated with landmarks that, due to past changes, are now partially submerged or have risen from the ocean, or these sort of things. So there's that deep history. And I guess in new work, like Trevor's choice to compose something around the bull shark, the bull shark's behavior has changed already in our country as a result of climate change, in terms of fish stocks changing in the ocean, those sort of impacts having an effect there, and then more bull sharks moving up the river. So I guess we're always going to be responding to climate change in one way or another. Yeah, does that help enough? Have you got anything to add, Trevor?
Yeah, yeah. Towards the bull shark dance, like Clint was saying, it's an understanding of country and also the animals and plants and the elements. And this is what this is one thing that Clint and I always talk about. In particular, with the bull shark dance, it's that knowledge of the shark itself, and when we talk about how the shark can travel from saltwater to freshwater through the osmosis regulatory within its kidneys, flushing out that saltwater to freshwater. And this is the thing that's happening like around the world towards climate change, towards how they're building the desalination plants throughout the world to bring in the salt water and then flush out the salt to make fresh water. And this is what the bull shark or the sharks have been doing for over 400 million years. And we're just catching on to all this here for the last, well, I think about 40 years now, towards these desalination plants, 60 years. That's in regards to the bull shark. And also with the groundwater dance, which is another dance that we do. That's dating back to like one of the areas within Noongar country towards the Nangara Mountain. That water dates back to 175 million years old. And these certain areas throughout the world are getting affected towards pumping stations that pump this groundwater from underneath. And this is an issue throughout the whole world towards climate change and what's happening with water in general. And that's another dance that connects to us towards the groundwater dance and the aquifers and and the dreaming stories that we have towards our connection towards the rainbow or the waggle, and how that travels in towards us as Noongar people in our dreaming stories.
I guess our choices, our creative choices, are guided very much by what we want to draw attention to, and those are usually things that are species or elements that are under threat due to human activity and climate change and all these other things. So for us, it's direct motivation to the repertoire we're creating.
Maybe I could just add something from my perspective on what's happened with Mudgel. I think the question was sort of directed to song content, but in fact, what we are seeing is a lot of adaptation of song context, and so the creation of new contexts for performance, responding to the loss of the forests by moving performances into new spaces is one example of that. And I should also mention that the texts of those performances are newly composed and adapted to whoever is available, and so there is a lot of responsiveness and adaptation to changing audiences and performance spaces built into the current practice.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Clint and Trevor. Would anybody else like to comment on that, or shall I move on to the next question? Okay, so the next question is from Wadabar Weatherall. Thank you everyone for sharing. My question is, since creation and knowledge isn't static and is forever developing, are there certain criteria in developing new songs to ensure that they are anchored to historical processes or formats? And do you think the new songs are able to be used in various situations such as ceremonial, or would cultural protocols prevent this? And it sounds a bit like a question for Clint and Trevor, perhaps, again. Are you happy to take that?
Yeah, sure. I think it'd depend entirely on the local context. Like in the context of Jumba up north, that's a lot of that's developed as a result of changing contexts and having to come up with new ways to do ceremony. And similarly with the work Trevor and I are doing, it's all responding to changing contexts. And I think when it comes to what new songs can be used for, that's determined by the people that create them, the country in which they create them, and the senior people there. Certainly in Trevor and my experience, we've been asked to sing and dance in a variety of different contexts for a variety of different reasons, sometimes more public and sometimes more private.
Okay, maybe I could also just say something about the Wonga and Edgar traditions that Pai and I were talking about. Of course, these are also newly created songs in that they are dreamt by individuals. They're usually given to those individuals by their deceased ancestors, very often their fathers. And so there is a sort of constant source of creativity and adaptability that is built into this. Country is speaking to people in a contemporary environment, but also out of a deep past. I wonder what the situation is with Jumba, Sally, in that regard.
Yeah, I you know, as particularly as you were presenting the deep look of the the song lyrics in your presentation with Pai there, Alan. It was certainly resonating with I guess what we've called the multivalency of Jumba lyrics, and in that Windjagan song, it's at once Matthew's mother singing. It's also at once the spirit of her father speaking and singing, and then it's at once Damaladingari and a further layer, it's Brad Wanjana. So there's many layers of voice encoded in the lyrics, and that potential for multivalency, and also for potentially for reinterpretation grounded in that ancestral precedent, is something that we see quite a lot. And so the innovation that we see with use of recordings, the desire for databases for accessing recordings to be interlinked between collections and archives and so on, and also, when people are performing on conference stages and so on, these are all, this notion of ancestral precedent for innovation is kind of ever present.
Thank you. Thanks, Sally. Any more comments on that? Linda, did you want to say anything? No? Okay. So this may be the last question. And it's in fact from Kylie Brast from the Academy. And I think it's a really important question that I'd like to probably finish up with. How do we get this knowledge into the hands of policymakers and politicians? Do any panelists have experience in translating knowledge into policy audiences? Anybody like to have a go at that, or should I say something about the National Recording Project? Back in 2004, a group of concerned practitioners and academics, and in particular, the late Dr. Yunupingu of Yothi Yindi fame, and Professor Marcia Langton and I initiated a project that was designed to engage the government in this very serious problem of the loss of traditions. Sally was, in fact, everybody here was in fact involved quite deeply in that project, and it continues on to this day, and holds annual symposia. However, I have to say that the engagement with people who determine policy was extremely difficult, despite numerous approaches to federal government ministers and other initiatives. We were never able to fully realize the vision of this project, which was basically to train young Indigenous people in the technologies, recording technologies, archiving technologies, for them to work under the direction of elders to create a repository of the current knowledge about public song and ceremony. I don't think we've completely lost hope that, that this may bear fruit at some time in the future. One can never tell. And certainly a lot of work was put into that. But at the moment, we're still exploring those avenues. And perhaps the Academy could also help us in this regard. I think we're pretty much drawing to the end. Are there any quick comments from any of the other panelists with regard to that question?
I'll just add that through IATSIS, there's potentially some hope. Certainly the current minister is very attuned to the importance of song and dance and language and culture. So we'll see what happens. I think there may be movement afoot. I think all the good work that people have done for so many years is, yeah, I see it.
Could I just add that there is actually a fundraiser page on the IATSIS website to raise to engage the broader public in some of these efforts. So it's yes, I just encourage you to have a look on the IATSIS website.
I should also mention that I'm chair of the IATSIS Foundation, which is that fundraising arm. So thank you, Linda. I got so swept up in my hope, I forgot the nitty gritty. But yeah, the IATSIS Foundation is running a Songs of Australia project, which people can donate to. And there's also the Dictionaries project that was spearheaded by Rachel Perkins. So there's potential for the public to really get behind supporting intangible cultural heritage in this country, because it's so important to the country itself.
Great. Well, on that very hopeful note, I would like to move to drawing this session to a close. First of all, thank you to all the panelists for a really inspiring session, and for all the many years of work that have gone into the presentations today. And I'd like to thank all the people who have attended today in this symposium. I gather there were something like 370 people registered for this session. So it's been wonderful to have this opportunity to speak to you all. Finally, I'd like to just draw your attention to our next session, which is the awards celebration, which is at 4 o'clock this afternoon. And awards will be presented to the recipients of the John Mulvaney Fellowship, the Crawford Medal, and the Medal for Excellence in Translation. And tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, please tune in for the following session entitled Emerging Insights in the Environmental Humanities. If you've not already done so, I'd encourage you to register for these events. So thank you all very much, and that concludes our session. Goodbye.